We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It's Monday. We're starting out another week. Should be an interesting week. We had a good one last week. A lot of shit happening, and things should continue. I mean, at the stage we're at now, leading up to the election in November and all the things happening with Donald Trump, it's going to get busy and busier every day. It's going to be more troubling for Donald Trump, too, and all those people that decide to side with him. We saw what Katie Britt is dealing with now. Katie Britt is the Republican senator who decided to give a response to Joe Biden's State of the Union. Yeah, it's not going well for her. She came off looking ridiculous, and she's been panned all over the place, including Saturday Night Live, who did an excellent parody of what she did. Scarlett Johansson played her to a T. If you haven't seen it, go on YouTube and check it out because nicely done. Nicely done. And then we find out that not only did she look foolish, but she lied, kind of an egregious lie. And that lie was that she told a story about a woman who was sex trafficked and was blaming it on Joe Biden and his border stance. Well, it turns out that particular incident happened 2007, 2008. It happened in Mexico during the George W. Bush administration. That's part and parcel to the Republicans. They will make shit up, pull shit out of history, and try to attach it to Joe Biden or the Democrats every time. It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if there are facts tied to it. They use it, and they'll lie and they'll throw it out there, and they believe it's for the greater good. Well, we're lying about these people, but we got to get the Democrats out of there. They're tearing down our country, when exactly the opposite is true. You can't help but think these Republicans are evil because they know exactly what's going on. They're playing the games they are with the lies and the narrative and all the bullshit, but they just keep doing it. But if you notice what's going on here, none of it ever works. All of it is falling apart. Everybody tied to Donald Trump is starting to fade themselves, starting to spiral. And this is how it's going to go between now and November. Everything's going to get steadily worse for Donald Trump and all those people that decide to stick with him. So keep an eye out for it. That's what's going to happen. And come November, it's not even going to be close. Everything around Donald Trump will have fallen apart. Any strength, any strategy he had will be done. Now, people will say, I think Donald Trump will win in November. I've told you so many ways that he can't win. I'm not going to go over those again. But here's one good point that you need to know. In terms of money for the campaign, Joe Biden has $130 million. Pretty fair sum. Donald Trump has $30 million, $100 million less than Joe Biden, and he's having trouble fundraising. He's having trouble fundraising because the vast majority of the people see he's a bad risk. He's not a good bet. He's going to lose. They don't want to throw good money after bad. And if nothing else, the fact that nobody's willing to support him financially should tell you what's going to happen in November. All right, we have some emails, as we always do. Let's get to them. First one says, this will be short. I hate to contradict Old Soul, but in California, you can't run for two offices at the same time. So Katie and Barbara Lee gave up their House seats to run for Senate. I hope Biden finds good places for them in his cabinet in his next term. I heard some suggest that Katie would be a good replacement for Garland as AG. A firebrand, a bulldog. Yes, that is who we need in that position. Keep up the good work, Grandma Patty. Now, I did not know that, and I'm presuming that Old Soul didn't know that either. I was wondering about it. That was one of my biggest worries about Adam Schiff and Katie Porter running for the same seat, the Senate seat. Both of them are very valuable for the Democrats in Congress. We really can't afford to lose one of them. But if what Grandma Patty is saying correctly, Katie Porter will not be in the House next year because she can't run for her House seat At the same time, she was running for the Senate seat, and she's out of the game in the Senate seat. So I don't know what that means. And Barbara Lee, too. She's an excellent person. Could have been a great senator, too. Yeah, I hope Joe Biden recognizes the need to keep these people around, especially Katie Porter. She could be an attorney general. She could be any number of things, but we have to keep her in a position where her voice and her abilities are used. I mean, you can't make her the HUD director or something like that because then you just never hear from her again. We need to hear from Katie Porter, and Katie Porter is going to be doing things. I don't know if she'll ever be senator of California. Typically, when these people get in these roles in the Senate, especially in California, they're there for a while, a long while. So if that option is out the window for Katie Porter, does she go again and run for the House of Representatives? Does she run for governor? Does she get put in the cabinet? I don't know what's going to happen, but we cannot afford to lose her altogether. So hopefully they find some way for her to stick in the game. All right, the next one comes from Vicky in Colorado. She says, Mike, so now No Labels is joining the race and is backed by God knows who, probably Russia. This gives Haley voters somewhere to go. Most of them don't want to vote for Biden. With margins razor thin in 5 to 6 states that Biden narrowly won in 2020, we'd better hope people aren't dumb enough to fall for this BS in those states. Keep doing the Lord's work. Best, Vicky in Colorado. Well, you'll remember that the No Labels Party asked or talked about joining the race sometime, and then they dropped out of it. You know, they're looking at Manchin and other people, and then Manchin, of course, said he's not going to run. It's probably for the best. There's no way Joe Manchin could garner any support. The Republicans don't like him. The Democrats don't like him. Yes, they said they're looking to mount a presidential campaign. Problem is, they don't have anybody yet. They don't have a candidate. It's a little hard to determine what's going to happen if they don't have a fucking candidate. I wouldn't be surprised if they drop out again. Maybe it's going to be Robert F. Kennedy. That might be a logical choice. And to be perfectly honest with you, if Robert F. Kennedy is that choice, I have no problem with it. Because Robert F. Kennedy will take votes away from the Republicans and not the Democrats. See, that's something you have to consider. The fact that if there is a third party, it's not just the Democrats that can suffer, it could be the Republicans too, which I'm all for. Or maybe No Labels is waiting for Donald Trump to drop out and see if he'll go with them. You know, there may come a point where the Republicans say, you're just not a winnable option. We're going to have to dump you from the campaign. And I doubt that's going to happen, but it could. And maybe they're looking at that possibility. It's real easy to say we're going to mount a campaign and we're going to be a third party, and people get all nervous about it. Don't get nervous about it. They don't have any support. That's why they don't have a candidate right now. And think, what candidate could they do to damage the Democrats? I don't know who that would be. I mean, RFK would be the logical choice, and he's more of an issue for Republicans than he is Democrats. I don't know. We'll see. I've told people before, don't go looking for things to worry about until they're ready to be worried about. The No Labels third party hasn't given us any reason to think they have any support. And to be honest with you, Joe Biden is gaining more support in the Democrats. As he comes out and talks the way he's talking, more people who might have been questioning his veracity may be shifting back over to Biden. It's like all these uncommitted folks that are trying to protest against Joe Biden. Here's the deal. All those uncommitted folks, they're not going to vote for Donald Trump or the Republican Party. That makes no sense. They're trying to make a point. They're trying to leverage Joe Biden, pressure him to do their bidding. But when it comes down to it, they're going to vote for Joe Biden because Donald Trump is just not an option. They understand what the problems are if Donald Trump gets to be president again. But I think that with Joe Biden, He's going to win by such a big margin. It really doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. Anyway, thank you very much, Vicky. Next one is, this is a letter to the editor I wrote for our local paper in a bright red city. There seems to be a lot of confusion about inflation and gas prices. I'll try to explain simply. When the inflation rate is 9%, you can expect to pay 9% more for your groceries now than you did last year. When the inflation rate is 3%, you can expect to pay 3% more than you did last year. But you're always going to pay more. Prices don't come down unless there's deflation. The last period of deflation was in the Bush recession in 2007. Gas prices are the exception. They go up and down with the price controlled by OPEC. The U.S. is the largest producer of oil in the world now, but we don't produce enough to meet our own needs, even though we're now producing more than we have ever before. So we import about 8 million barrels of oil a day, and we always have. We haven't ever been energy independent and cannot be as long as we need to import oil. We are, however, a net exporter of energy because we export enough coal and natural gas to more than pay for the oil we import. Since we have no oil to export, we have no control over the world oil and gas prices. When OPEC cuts production, as they are doing right now, our price of gas goes up. So we can expect gas prices to increase steadily from now until the election. There's no mystery about Saudi Arabia who they would like to see as president. Thank you. And that comes from Scott. And Scott makes a good point. You know, there are so many things that are so political. And as Saudi Arabia would like to see Donald Trump president because they can manipulate him and get him to do anything they want, of course, the gas prices are going to go up. They're going to try to meddle in the 2016 or 2024 election, much like they did in 2016 and 2020. That's just a given. But thank you for the explanation of inflation. Now, in those cases where inflation is 3%, yet some things are even higher than 3% more than they were last year, that can be attributed to corporate greed. You know, the corporations got a little spoiled during the pandemic. They were able to raise prices on some things other than gas, raise prices on something because they were hard to get or the supply chain was fucked up or something. And once they got comfortable with charging those prices and things went back to normal, they were reticent to bring it back down. They're going, hey, this is free money. Why would we bring it back down? And a lot of them didn't. So, in spite of the supply chain being fixed and the pandemic being over, these greedy fucks still want to take a bigger chunk. And therein lies the problem and why inflation hasn't gone down even faster than it already has. All right, the next one says, I would like to offer an opinion on the shenanigans surrounding the California Senate race. Schiff's action of donating to the Garvey campaign was underhanded but politically smart. Let's be honest, Schiff will defeat Garvey in a landslide. He would have faced significantly more expensive, energy-intensive fight against Porter. Not to mention, would have to be a lot less spinny with his statements because Katie would call him on everything misinformation with factual truth. Furthermore, Porter is much more effective in the House than she would be in the Senate. Schiff, being a career politico with years of playing the game and networking within the government, will make him a valuable asset to the Dems' Senate majority in the next term. This will give the Dems greater ability to wrangle deals on the off chance the majority spread remains right as it currently is. Porter remaining in the House to decimate false and misleading Republican statements and witnesses' testimony is needed. When combined with the likes of AOC, Moskowitz, and the other newer Dems in the House, and with the huge majority of Dems should enjoy next term, that will lead to more honesty, transparency, and interest for the populace and should begin to restore the confidence that is so needed, but so lacking in government's ability to get anything accomplished. Well, that's a good point. But as was pointed out earlier, and I need to check this to make sure, I've heard both sides of this. But from what we were told in the previous emailer is she won't be able to run for her office in 2024, her office in the House, which means she's out of the House, which I think is problematic. So I'm going to check and verify exactly what it is. And to the emailer, I'm not saying you don't know what you're talking about or lying. That's just my process. I hear two sides of the thing. I dig it out. I find out for myself so I know exactly what I'm talking about. Emailer goes on to say what would be a good strategy for Porter would be another full term in the House, increasing her media presence and becoming part of leadership of the caucus. And if she decides to remain in Congress after 28, put herself forward the speakership. If she doesn't want to remain in Congress, then she should seriously consider a run for governor. She would be a very effective in that role, especially in California, where there is so much red tape and regulations that need to be cleaned up, and she is the one that can do it, Stephanie. Yeah, if she in fact can't go back to the House of Representatives, running for governor would be one angle. Depends on what Gavin Newsom's doing. Gavin Newsom, I think, is pretty popular in California. That said, come 2028, he may be looking at greener pastures, like in the presidency and such. So I don't know how it will all work out. I know it will work out. Um, but I would hope to God that Katie Porter can stay in the House. I don't know if that's true based on what my emailers are saying, but I will find out. Trust me on this. I will find out. All right. Next email. Here's a story that I hadn't heard of before, but thought it was interesting. There's a thing called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact that is a multi-state, including DC, agreement that says they will award all of their electoral votes to the presidential candidate that wins the overall popular vote. There are 17 states with DC that have adopted this so far, and several that are pending a decision, around a dozen. No surprise, Minnesota and Illinois have already adopted it. As we know, each state has a certain number of electoral votes. The states which have passed this and their electoral votes total 205. If all states that are pending passage go through with it, that would add another 131 electoral votes. They only need to reach 270 in order for it to go in effect. I hope I explained this so it's understandable. Oh, and it's been floating around for almost 20 years. It doesn't make any sense why we're still using the antiquated electoral system. Winning the popular vote should be law by now, but this sounds like a great way around it. Several of my friends who are everybody comes up with a different word, so I got to be able to figure out how to read it. Trumpla thin skin fans are still bitching and moaning about how animated and direct Biden was on Thursday. They just can't make up their mind. Shake my head. All the best, Peg HM. And this is why I love the emails, because I always get a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different information, and much like when I have Old Soul or Ed or any of the listeners on the show, I always learn something new. If I am anything, I'm kind of a sponge. I'm kind of a nerd for these facts, and I kind of soak them up and they bounce around in my head and somehow come out my mouth eventually. But I'm always intrigued by the information, and I appreciate it when I get it from the emailers. And please don't be offended if I check your work, because I check everybody's work. I need to know in my heart exactly what it is and what it means in order for me to talk about it and in order for me to kind of analyze what it actually means. So I've got some homework planned for me here, and I will get to it once we're done with the podcast. All right. Now, on Sunday, Senator Katie Britt of Alabama, you remember her, she's the one that gave the response to Joe Biden's State of the Union, made a fool out of herself. She looked like somebody auditioning for a soap opera. She was horrible at what she did. And of course, she lied, as I mentioned early in the podcast. Well, on Sunday, she upheld her misleading claim that pinned the blame on President Joe Biden's border policies for that harrowing anecdote about a survivor of sex trafficking. Now, during her State of the Union rebuttal, Britt appeared to inaccurately tie Biden's administration with a woman who was sex trafficked at a young age. The Congresswoman's office confirmed to the Washington Post on Saturday that she was referring to Carla Jacinto Romero, an activist who publicly shared her experience of being sex trafficked to raise awareness about the dangers it poses. Now, Romero's experience occurred in Mexico, not in the U.S., and took place during President George W. Bush's administration. She shared her story at a congressional hearing in 2015. We wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country, Britt said as she brought up Romero's story during her rebuttal. This is the United States of America, and it is past time, in my opinion, that we start acting like it. President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. Now, um, she was asked on Fox News Sunday. The host was Shannon Bream. She said, "Did you mean to give the impression that this horrible story happened on President Biden's watch?" Regarding her telling of this story. Now, initially, Britt did not respond directly to the question. Oh, big surprise. They never respond directly to a question. Instead, she discussed Biden's first 100 days in office, his decision to stop building the border wall, and his attempt to temporarily stop mass deportations before going on to say human trafficking has gone up during Biden's presidency. We all need to tell these stories, and the liberal media needs to pay attention to it because they are victims all the way coming to the border. There are victims at the border. Then there are victims all throughout our country, Britt said. To me, it's disgusting to try to silence the voice of telling the story of what it is like to be sex trafficked when we know that it is one of the things that drug cartels are profiting off most. You notice she didn't answer the question. They never answer the fucking question because if they did, they'd look stupid. Now, the host pressed back saying, "Okay, but to be clear, the story that you related is not something that's happened under the Biden administration that to that particular person." And this is what she says. I love it when Republicans always start a message by saying, "Well, it's clear. I clearly stated." That means it's not. And she started it out that way. "I very clearly said I spoke to a woman who told me about when she was trafficked when she was 12. So I didn't say a teenager," Britt replied. "I didn't say a young woman, a grown woman, a woman when she was trafficked when she was 12 years old." And so, listening to her story, she is a victim's rights advocate who is telling this is what drug cartels are doing. This is how they are profiting off women, and it is disgusting, Britt continued. And so I'm hopeful that it brings some light to the situation. We can actually do something about human trafficking, and that's what the media actually decides to cover. Still no answer to the question. She clearly tried to attribute this to Joe Biden, and frankly, it didn't work. It didn't work at all. Now, the White House responded to Britt's rebuttal on Sunday, accusing her of sharing debunked lies instead of telling more debunked lies to justify opposing the toughest bipartisan border legislation in modern history. Senator Britt should stop choosing human smugglers and fentanyl traffickers over the National Security and Border Patrol Union. Now, White House Press Deputy Secretary Andrew Bates said in a statement, like President Biden said in his State of the Union, we have a simple choice. We can fight about fixing the border or we can fix it. And that, that's clearly clearly the case. I told you before that this Katie Britt, she is one of the Republicans that helped put together this bipartisan border bill. They spent months working on it. The Democrats basically gave in to everything the Republicans wanted. The border bill was probably the most stringent border policy in the history of this country. The Republicans got far more than they could have ever expected. And of course, the reason that the Democrats did that is because they needed to get funding for Ukraine and Israel. So they were able to give a little bit on the border in order to get what they wanted. But when it came down to it, Donald Trump decided that should that border bill pass, it would look too good for Joe Biden. It would be a win for Joe Biden. And since that was a particularly favorite talking point of the Republicans, he thought better of passing the bill. So when the bill came to the floor, Katie Britt, amongst others, voted against it. The very thing they worked months and months on, the very thing that is the topic that they feel is the most important, that they feel is the most dangerous on the border. They chose instead not to do anything on the border, simply for political reasons, simply because they were afraid it was going to make Joe Biden look good. And I don't even know if they thought that or they were concerned about that, but they had enough leverage from Donald Trump that he forced them into that situation. Now, the fact of the matter is they took something that was their talking point that was bullshit initially, but now they've lost that talking point because every time they come up with something like that, they're going to say, well, we wanted to pass the border bill. Joe Biden would have shut down the border in the instances where there was a crush of migrants coming across the border, but they chose instead to not do it. Donald Trump talks about the tragedies, the sex trafficking, the cartels, fentanyl, and all that stuff. He keeps telling us how horrible it is, but he's chosen to let it continue until he presumably gets into office so he can be the hero. That tells you what kind of human being that motherfucker is. Not a good human. And the Republicans aren't good humans. They don't care about the border. They don't care about the people, the women that are sex trafficked. All they care about is political expediency. Anything that's going to help Donald Trump win the election. The ridiculous thing is nothing's going to help. It's not going to help. He doesn't have the money. He won't have the time. He doesn't have the support. You know, as I've told you before, polls have said, and, you know, we take polls for what they're worth. The polls have said that 20 or 25% of Republicans won't even vote for Donald Trump because of all the bullshit he's pulled and all the shit he's in right now. And if you can't get your entire Republican Party to unite behind a candidate, well, there's no way you can fucking win. It doesn't matter. He's already lost the independents and the moderates. And of course, the Democrats aren't going to vote for him. This is lining up to be a huge blue wave and possibly a landslide for Joe Biden against Donald Trump. Told you many times before that I don't think Donald Trump will be the nominee, and I still kind of feel that way. But that said, I'm okay if he is the candidate because I think that's the best scenario for Democrats. That's the easiest win for Joe Biden if Donald Trump is the candidate. This guy is a broken human being. This guy is a damaged candidate. Even at his best, he couldn't beat Joe Biden, and he's far from his best. He's going to be financially destroyed. He's going to be convicted of crimes, and he's going to be losing his shit when all this pressure is raining down on his head. He's going to be a horrible candidate. It's just a matter of if the Republicans are going to recognize that, and if they do recognize that, what are they going to do about it? Maybe nothing, because as I've said before, if Donald Trump is not the nominee, then a lot of people won't vote at all, which is fine with me because not only does it affect Donald Trump, but it affects the down ballot too. If the Trumplicans don't come out and vote, They can't vote for Donald Trump because he's not the nominee, and they can't vote for members of the House. They can't vote for members of the Senate, the state legislatures, or the governorships. That would be the best scenario, really, if Donald Trump does drop out and the Trump-fucks just say, oh, we'll show you we're not going to vote, because that's pretty much what they fucking do. So we'll see what happens. Katie Britt is an absolute fool. If she hasn't ruined her career, she's in the process of doing it. She did what every Republican does. She fucks up, she makes a fool out of herself, and instead of stepping back and saying, geez, yeah, I fucked up, I'm sorry, she doubles and triples down. And all she does is make herself look worse. So you go for it, Katie Britt, you dumb bitch, because you are going to lose. You're going to spend one term in the Senate, and then you'll be gone, because even Republicans can't stand stupid motherfuckers. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Well, Donald Trump and Joe Biden both were down in Georgia on the same day giving campaign speeches. They weren't in the same town, they didn't see each other, but it was interesting nonetheless. Joe Biden and Donald Trump both warned of dire consequences for the country if their opponent wins another term in the White House. They had dueling rallies in Georgia Saturday, fresh off the both getting strong wins in Super Tuesday contests that positioned them for an all but certain rematch this November, assuming Donald Trump can bear the beating he's in for from legal folks and the exposure to his criminality and scandalous behavior. Now, Georgia, of course, was a pivotal 2020 battleground. So close 4 years ago that Trump finds himself indicted for his push to find 11,780 votes and overturn Biden's victory. And both parties are preparing for another closely contested race in the state this year. Now, Biden opened his speech at a rally in Atlanta, noting that Trump was across the state with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. You know who she is. Um, it can tell you a lot about a person who he keeps company with, Biden said to Applause. Biden noted that Trump had hosted Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has rolled back democracy in his country, at his Florida club the other day. He is a dictator, a strong man, if you will. When he says he wants to be a dictator, I believe him, Biden said of Trump. Our freedoms are literally on the ballot this November. Now, Biden hosted the rally at Pullman Yards, a 27-acre arts and entertainment venue in Atlanta that was formerly an industrial site to receive the endorsement of the collective PAC Latino Victory Fund and AAPI Victory Fund, a trio of political groups representing respectively Black, Latino, and Asian Americans and Pacific Island voters. Groups were announcing a $30 million commitment to mobilize voters on Biden's behalf. Now, Trump, was a little different scenario with Trump when he gave his speech. Meanwhile, he hammered Biden on the border and blamed him for the death of 22-year-old Georgia nursing student Laken Riley last month. An immigrant from Venezuela who entered the U.S. illegally has been arrested and charged with her murder. He hosted Riley's family at his rally in Rome, Green's hometown. Now, what Joe Biden has done to our border is a crime against humanity and the people of this nation for which he will never be forgiven. Yet Joe Biden wants to pass a bipartisan border bill and Donald Trump does not. Please explain, Donnie. Trump said, promising the largest deportation in history. What a tremendous shame, he said. Now, ahead of his rally, Biden expressed regret for using the term illegal during his State of the Union address to describe Riley's suspected killer, drawing more criticism from Trump's team. A slip of the tongue, and Trump is bitching. Ironic, isn't it? Now, Trump, who took the stage at the same moment Biden was still speaking at another part of the state, skewered the president for the apology and said, "Are we going crazy?" I say he was an illegal alien. He was an illegal immigrant. He wasn't an illegal migrant. And and he shouldn't have been in our country, and he never would have been under the Trump policy, he said to loud cheers. Really, because the amount of people coming in across the border is very similar to now to what Donald Trump had. Donald Trump had no answer to this. He had no fix for it. The border wall was never built, and the Mexicans never paid for it. Now, Trump also highlighted the very things Biden knocked him for, saying that he had dinner last night with a great gentleman from Hungary, Viktor Orban, and praised Green for yelling at Biden during the State of the Union about Riley, calling her very brave. She looked like a fucking clown, is what she looked like, in her red t shirt and red hat, and spewing venom as she does, and looking like a complete idiot. But of course, Donald Trump would love that. Now, Viktor Orban is not a great gentleman from Hungary. He's a vicious dictator. He's what Donald Trump would know as a strong man, and he loves strong men because he's not, and he aspires to be what Viktor Orban is. Unfortunately, that's not what most of us want in this country, and that is to Donald Trump's peril. That's why he will not get elected to the presidency. Now, Trump's rally opened with a message asking attendees to rise to support the hundreds of people serving jail time for their roles in the insurrection on January 6th, when thousands of pro-Trump supporters tried to overturn the 2020 election. The intensity of the rhetoric was grueling. 8 months of campaigning ahead. Yeah, Donnie was a little out of control in this speech. One of the things that Donnie did, which is deplorable, but is expected out of somebody like Donald Trump, when he went up there and he was deriding Joe Biden, he was mocking him, talking slow and stuttering to make fun of Joe Biden. That's who you're dealing with, Republicans. You're dealing with a fucking child, a 7-year-old who can't do anything more than try to mock somebody. The irony of this whole thing, Joe was very clear and cognizant through his whole State of the Union address. Donald Trump can't say that. We've got video after video of Donald Trump slurring, making up words, and talking about shit that doesn't make any sense. But that's who Donald Trump is. He goes on the attack and he doesn't think about what he's doing. He doesn't consider the ramifications or the comparisons between him and Joe, because there is no comparison between he and Joe. The Republicans have spent all this time saying Joe's doddering, Joe can't finish a sentence. Well, they were proven wrong during the State of the Union. Joe came off very clear, very strong, very inspirational, and very positive. Donald Trump is just the opposite. He's not clear. He's rambling. He spends hours talking about the same shit over and over again. And when he is, very often, he is having trouble forming the words he's trying to speak. If anybody looks like they're diminished cognizantly or cognitively, it would be Donald Trump. Joe Biden didn't look that way at all. And I think a lot of people were surprised, like Fox News. See, this is what Republicans do. They take something, they make it up, much like Katie Britt did with this sex trafficking story. They throw it out there to make Joe Biden look bad. It's funny, you would think somebody who's been in politics as long as Joe Biden, they could find something that's actually real, some actual dirt against Joe Biden. Either they're lazy or it doesn't exist, so they make shit up. They make shit up and they throw it out there and it gets into the ether. And of course, all the little Trumplafucks, believe it. But unfortunately, it gets thrown around so much that even some Democrats, even some media start to believe it. That's why I think some of the media was surprised that Joe Biden came off as well as he did. I wasn't surprised at all. I've watched his speeches. He does have some idiosyncrasies. You know, he does stutter a time or two, but that's part and parcel to his entire life. He doesn't talk as fast and rapid fire as Donald Trump or some other folks, but that's not his style. Joe Biden has his own style, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with somebody who thinks about what they're saying and is meticulous about the words, and sometimes has to fix what he might say, like when he's called the person who killed um, uh, that young woman Lakin. He called him illegal. You know, that's about um, appropriateness. You know, he he was illegal, but he was a migrant. And then Donald Trump has the audacity to give him shit about it when he says that very thing all the time. He's shaming Joe Biden for the very thing he does all the time. That's what's so ridiculous about this. Now, here's a guy I like a lot. My wife and I see him on MSNBC all the time, and I have a lot of respect for the guy. Now, during his weekly appearance with MSNBC, host Jen Psaki, former Solicitor General Neil Katyal, stated he wishes he was E. Jean Carroll's attorney after Donald Trump attacked her once again at the Georgia rally on Saturday night. That's right, he did. He defamed E. Jean Carroll again. I heard the video. It is the essence of defamation of character. Now, let's just go back. Donald Trump was found liable for defamation of character the first time around for his defamation of E. Jean Carroll. He was essentially fined $5 million. Now, had Donald Trump paid the $5 million and shut his fucking trap, he'd be fine. But he couldn't do that. Instead, he gets sued again. This time, he gets hit with an $83.3 million judgment. And he just posted $91 million to appeal this case. Now, he's not going to win the appeal, but he went and did it a fucking again. He defamed E. Jean Carroll again. He said, I don't know this woman. I never did anything. This is all a lie. This is a hoax. The very thing that got him that $83.3 million decision is what he did in Georgia. Now, do you think E. Jean Carroll's lawyer's going to sue him again? I bet the fuck he does. Now, by the time they sue him and get even a bigger decision, he probably won't have any money left, but it's the thought that counts, I guess. Now, after watching a clip of Trump telling the crowd 91 million based on false accusations made by me, made about me by a woman that I knew nothing about and didn't know, never heard of. I know nothing about her, Catchall said. A third defamation lawsuit could be in the offing. Did you hear that? Did he cross the line? Did he defame E. Jean Carroll again? Psaki asked. Catchell says, it sure sounds like it. And Jen, there are many days that I wish I was Roberta Kaplan, who is E. Jean Carroll's extraordinary lawyer. She has been so phenomenal as a lawyer. But boy, today is the day. I wish I was, because Donald Trump is basically just writing the third lawsuit that she's going to file right now. And again, he does it on videotape, on television. It's not like he can deny it, or you just misconstrued it, or you didn't hear it right. Oh, we heard it right, and it was defamation of character. He then continued, and it is absolutely within her rights to bring that lawsuit in and create a whole other. Remember, Trump lost in front of a jury of his peers on this question of whether he had defamed E. Jean Carroll, and now he's doing it again. I'm sure she's sitting there scribbling it all down. Now, it was $5 million the first time, and then $83.3 million. Remember what the lawyer asked, what's it going to take to shut him up? Now, after he got hit with that $83.3 million decision, he did shut up for a time, but apparently he has a short memory. That might be tied to the dementia or the Alzheimer's or whatever he's got, but he forgot. And now he's doing it again. And for all intents and purposes, E. Jean Carroll's lawyer can sue him again. What he said in Georgia is exactly what got him in trouble in the second lawsuit and in the first lawsuit. So I wouldn't be surprised if she files another lawsuit. Not at all. Not that it would make a difference because Donald Trump is going to be buried in legal problems as it is, but this can just be added on to the pile. Now, there's a man who successfully prosecuted Donald Trump, says people are sleeping on the former president's upcoming hush money trial. Now, I've heard a lot of people talking about this. It's not that big a deal. The statute of limitations has run out. None of that is true. This is a big deal. It's not just about hush money to Stormy Daniels. It's about election interference, and that is a felony. And that's what he's going to be on trial for. Trump is scheduled to be on trial in the case in which he has been accused of falsifying business records to pay off an adult film star to keep quiet about a purported affair in order to influence the 2016 election later in March. That's coming up March 25th. The day after or the day of, he has to post that $500 million bond. Now, many legal analysts have classed that case as the least consequential for the criminal cases the president has to face. Yeah, but it's still felonies. There's 34 charges. He's going to get convicted of some, and that is going to have a devastating effect on Donald Trump. Now, there's a guy you see on Twitter a lot and other parts of social media, Tristan Snell, who led the prosecution in the Trump University case, says this case will be bigger than most onlookers believe. It's going to be a consequential trial, Snell said of the Manhattan prosecution. I do believe there is a stigma attached if he is then voted by a jury to be a convicted felon. And let's be clear, they are definitely falsification of business records. It's a slam dunk factually. The only real issue here is whether or not it was done in the service of another crime, Snell said, adding that there are multiple angles the DA's office can pursue to get there. On the issue of falsification, he said there will be a clear response from the witness. We will hear a clear and compelling case that, yes, they took these payments to Stormy Daniels. They ran it through Michael Cohen and papered it later to make it look like it was legal fees to Michael Cohen, he said. You will hear it from other people at the organization, and you will hear it from the person that received the payments. You will hear it from Daniel's attorney at the time. It will be open and shut. There is only a legal issue that we need to hear about. And the entire thing will be tawdry for Trump. It will not paint him in a good light. It will probably make it worse if he takes the stand, which I think he'll probably want to take the stand. I think his lawyers would be wise to not allow him to do that. Um, uh, but, you know, these motherfuckers will do anything. Will do anything to that Donald Trump says because they're scared to death. Now, the only real issue here is whether or not it was done in the service of another crime. So that's what they've got to figure out. That's what they've got to establish. And you got to think that you got to think that a guy with a 98% conviction rate has got his ducks in order, his ducks in a row. You would think that. It was Michael Cohen that can probably verify these things that happen. And of course, they'll say, well, he's a convicted felon. Yeah, he's a convicted felon for trying to protect Donald Trump. And the Letitia James lawsuit, Judge Engeron stated that he was believable and he trusted what he said. This is going to be more consequential than I think people think. It's, people are kind of pushing it to the side, thinking it's not going to be that big a deal. It's a big deal. 34 felony charges. That's a big deal. whether it's about election interference or paying off Stormy Daniels or whatever. It may not be the most serious of the four, but it's serious enough. As I've told you before, all we need is one or two or three convictions, and he's done. And he will most certainly get that in the Manhattan case. He'll get probably double digits in terms of convictions. And then that changes everything. That changes what voters see and what they're willing to do. And that changes what Donald Trump can do. Because if they put him in jail, he can't do much of fucking anything. Now, there was a situation, Nancy Mace, she's a representative. She was on with George Stephanopoulos on CNN, I think, or maybe it was ABC. Anyway, Stephanopoulos asked her about her supporting Donald Trump in spite of the fact that he's been found liable for rape. She's been talking about Donald Trump for a long time. She once didn't like Donald Trump, and now she loves Donald Trump. I don't know if she thinks she's going to be a vice presidential candidate or what she's going to gain out of it, but she certainly flipped the script. And when asked, how do you justify supporting Donald Trump if he's been found liable for rape? What Nancy Mace did, of course, like all the Republicans, she did not answer the question. She goes, well, I was raped when I was 16. Are you trying to rape shame me? Are you trying to shame me? And that's what they do. When they can't answer the question, they play victim. And that's what she did. Now, if in fact she was raped when she was 16, I feel bad for that. And I'm sorry for the trouble that she's experienced with that and whatever other ramifications have come from that. But that wasn't the question. If in fact you've been raped, how can you support somebody who's also been accused and found guilty of rape? She wasn't willing to answer that. She couldn't answer it without going against Donald Trump. And you know, that's not what she's going to do. Now, Mace then invoked Stephanopoulos' past work for former President Bill Clinton, where he served the White House's communications director. She continued, I'm not going to be shamed for being raped by a guy who worked for a president who wagged his finger and lied to the American people about having oral sex with an intern in the Oval Office. Shut the fuck up. In addition to confronting the Congresswoman about his support of Trump or her, despite his being held liable for rape, Stephanopoulos also pressed Mace about her flip-flop in backing the former president after she said she wouldn't post January 6th. Now, you see, that's the problem with Republicans. A lot of people think that Donald Trump's got something on everybody. And honestly, you know, maybe he does, but he's just not smart enough to keep all this stuff together and play this blackmail game on everybody. These people have decided to side with Trump because either they believe as he does, or they believe that it is expedient for them to do so, meaning they'll gain more money or more votes. Now, the 2022 election would suggest something different, but somehow they've not grasped that. Part of this might be their fear of Donald Trump. Once you step on Donald Trump's toes, he's going to go to Truth Social and the media and talk shit about you. And maybe he does have something on these folks. I don't know. But in the end, what is going to happen is these people will be shunned and sent away in shame because they're not going to be able to explain themselves after Donald Trump has been convicted and in jail or whatever happens. And when Donald Trump, if he is still the nominee and he ends up in the election in November and he loses, same thing will happen. Any power they thought they might have or any protection they thought they might have because of the election will be gone. And that's same for Donald Trump too. As I've said, you know, you're worried about some of these cases or some of these trials going on after the election. I am not. We only need so many convictions to end it for Donald Trump. And if a lot of these trials go after the election, it's going to be worse for Donald Trump in the end because he doesn't have any protection at that point. He's just another losing candidate, another citizen just waiting to get his ass kicked. And that's exactly what's going to happen. He's going to get his ass kicked even worse when he's out of the public eye, or at least out of the the narrative of U.S. politics. Because once he loses in November, he's out of it. The Republicans won't want anything to do with him. And those people who have sided with him up till the very last moment will have some splaining to do. And if they can't explain their way out of it, they're fucking done. Their careers are over. I don't know how they don't realize this, but that's a fact. Now, a little bit of good news. President Joe Biden on Saturday signed a $460 billion package of spending bills approved by the Senate in time to avoid a shutdown for many key federal agencies. The legislation's success gets lawmakers about halfway home in the wrapping up of their appropriations work for the 2024 budget. Now, you'll remember that the first deadline was March 8th, but there's another deadline, March 22nd. So they still have more to do. We've gotten out of the shutdown on the 8th, but we still have to walk it up to the 22nd and make sure whatever they're doing gets passed. And it will. It will. They have to at this point. Now, the measure contains 6 annual spending bills and had already passed the House. In signing it into law, Biden thanked leaders and negotiators from both parties in both chambers for their work, which the White House said will mean that agencies may continue their normal operations. Meanwhile, lawmakers are negotiating the second package of 6 bills, including defense, in an effort to have all federal agencies fully funded by March 22nd. Now, Chuck Schumer said to folks who worry that divided government means nothing ever gets done, this bipartisan package says otherwise. And he said after lawmakers passed the measure on Friday night after hours before the deadline, he said the bill's passage would allow for hiring of more air traffic controllers and rail safety inspectors, give federal firefighters a raise, and boost support for homeless veterans, among other things. Now, the Senate passed the bill by a vote of 75 to 22. Lawmakers sought votes on several amendments and wanted to have their say on the bill and other priorities during the debate on the floor. It had been unclear Monday if senators would be able to avert a short shutdown, though eventual passage was never really in doubt. Now, Susan Collins said, I would urge my colleagues to stop playing with fire here. It would be irresponsible for us not to clear these bills and do the fundamental job that we have funding the government. What is more important, the votes came more than 5 months into the current budget year after congressional leaders relied on a series of stopgap bills to keep federal agencies funded for a few more weeks or months at a time while they struggled to reach an agreement on full year spending. This is something that's been relatively easy in the past. But with the insurgents or the appearance of MAGA, that's why this has all gone so badly, why we've had continuing resolution after continuing resolution. Now, it's important to understand what was passed and signed by Joe Biden is not a continuing resolution. It's only half of what we need to get done, but that's finalized. What they did finalize is finalized for the year. Now, of course, we're in March, 3 months into the year, so it's good for 9 months, and then we'll have to do it again next year. But by that time, we should have some reasonable folks in the House of Representatives, and the MAGA fucks will be marginalized. Now, in the end, total discretionary spending set by Congress is expected to come in at about $1.6 trillion for the full budget year ending September 30th. Republicans were able to keep non-defense spending relatively flat compared with the previous year. Supporters say that the progress in the area when annual federal deficits exceeding $1 trillion have become the norm, but many Republican lawmakers were seeking much steeper cuts. And That is the fact. They wanted to cut everything. So you have to wonder if this is going to cost Speaker of the House Mike Johnson anything. Clearly, the MAGA fucks aren't going to be happy that Mike Johnson and some of the Republicans negotiated with Joe Biden and the Democrats, that they needed the Democrats to pass this bill. They want the Republicans all to side with MAGA and pass the bills on their own. Well, that's just not possible because MAGA is fucking crazy. And there are a lot of Republicans in the House that don't agree with them. Therein lies one of the biggest problems for the Republicans in this upcoming November election. There is no unity among them. They don't even unify behind Donald Trump. They're going to have a lot of problems when it comes to the November election. They know it. I don't know that everybody out here knows it, but it's true. They're going to have problems. If not all Republicans are voting the same way, it's like they're running against a third party. And so any other third party might just make it worse for them. I don't think any third party is going to impact the Democrats, mainly because the Democrats are going to win so decisively, they'd have to have a big impact, and third parties never have a big impact. Certainly not enough to steal the election from Joe. And we talked about the third party that may be coming in, the No Labels Party. We'll see if that actually happens. You know, everything with Republicans is about making threats, but they very rarely follow through. They don't have a candidate, so they need to get a candidate first, and they don't know who that is because they don't know who they could get to take votes away from Joe Biden. They'd almost need to get another Democrat, a legitimate Democrat, and that's just not going to happen. So we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out, but at least the country isn't going to be shut down for the moment. Again, we have another bill that has to pass by the 22nd, and then we're good for the remainder of the year. Now, I'll tell you, it will pass. They'll get this figured out. And then after it's all said and done, we'll see if the MAGA crew gets mad enough at Mike Johnson to try to kick him out. At this stage, it almost doesn't matter. We're in the late stages of the term. You want to kick him out and do nothing and look silly between now and November, that's your business. This is the one thing we had to get done. Everything else we can't get done until the Republicans are replaced. That's the real job at hand here, is the election and getting the Republicans out of power, getting the Democrats in power. And then once that happens, we can actually start to get things done. Unfortunately, we have to wait till the election, but that's just the way it is. So that's what we'll do. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.